If you've ever watched Toddlers and Tiaras, you'd know that pageant moms can be a bit crazy. But would one pageant mom be crazy enough to execute her own daughter and stage it to look like someone else did it by writing a 2.5-page ransom note? Let's find out. JonBenét Ramsay was a 6-year-old little girl from Boulder, Colorado. She lived with her parents, John and Patsy, and her 9-year-old brother, Burke. She was one of those kids whose parents entered them in beauty pageants basically since birth, which is always so weird to me. Like, before their kids are even able to speak, people will put a tutu on them and try to make a couple bucks from it. And don't get me started on the whole go-go juice thing. At the age of 6, JonBenét had already won 5 pageant titles, including National Tiny Miss Beauty. So if she's already won 5, that makes me wonder how many she's competed in before. And at 6 years old, like, when I was 6, I was just digging at my nose and watching Dragon Tales, not wearing a flipper making hundreds of dollars. On the morning of December 26, 1996, John and Patsy couldn't find their daughter anywhere. While searching for JonBenét, Patsy found a 2.5-page ransom note on the back staircase of the house. Uh-oh, that's not a good sign. And does that mean someone had broken into their house to leave them the letter without them knowing about it until now? How does that even happen? So the letter was addressed to John Ramsay from a group of individuals who said they represent a small foreign faction, whatever that means. It was written by someone who had inconsistent scribbly handwriting with a lot of spelling and grammar errors as well. The mysterious scribbly writer, or group of writers, told John that they had kidnapped JonBenét and would give her back if he paid them $118,000 in cash. That's such a specific amount. They couldn't round up to $120,000 or something. Oh, and it wasn't just any cash. They literally wrote $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 will be in $20 bills. Then the mysterious kidnappers told John to put the money in a brown paper bag and wait for further instructions that they would tell him later over the phone. Okay, so whoever these people are, they're clearly detail-oriented. Also, why does the type of dollar bill matter to them so much? At that point, cash is cash, right? Like, as long as this dude isn't rolling up with rolls of quarters or something, I don't see the issue. The writer went on to threaten John and said that if he goes against any of the instructions at all, his daughter would be executed. No pressure at all. They also explicitly said not to tell anyone about the letter, including the cops, a bank teller, or even a stray dog. I'm not even joking. This person seriously told John that if they caught him talking to a stray dog, they would snuff his little girl. But then this person started to get a little sassy at the end of their letter. They wrote, "You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours." And was signed SBTC. Fat cat? Of all the insults to say, that's what they came up with? Patsy and John were freaking out at this point, so they called the cops. Wait, they called the cops? The letter literally just said if they told the cops, their daughter would be whacked. The cops showed up at the Ramsays' house at 5:55 in the morning and began an investigation. There were no signs of forced entry, but the only people who were at the house were John, Patsy, and their 9-year-old son, Burke. So either someone left the door unlocked, let a stranger in to kidnap JonBenét, or one of them did it themselves. The letter was written using paper and pen from the Ramsays' house. No fingerprints were found on it except from Patsy's, but she was the one who first picked it up, so that made sense. Officials found it odd that the letter was so long, especially for a ransom note written at the scene of the crime. Oh yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Like, to break into someone's house, kidnap their little girl, and then stop to write a detailed 2.5-page letter seems a bit much. They even had the time to call John a fat cat. John mentioned that the amount of money demanded in the letter was also almost the same amount he got in his Christmas bonus that year. So he thought maybe it was someone he worked with. Ooh, an angry coworker? That's definitely a possibility. That would also be a bit dramatic to kidnap someone's child because they bothered them at work. I used to work in an ice cream shop, and the worst thing I would do was not thaw out the ice cream for the next person if I didn't like them, so they really struggle to get the scoops. I'm not gonna kidnap their kid and write a letter about it. In their initial search, the police couldn't find JonBenét anywhere in the house, and her dad never got the call with the delivery instructions for the money like the kidnappers said they'd be making. Well, they also said not to call the cops, so that probably threw a wrench in the initial plan. Officers then sectioned off JonBenét's room to prevent contamination of possible evidence, but let the family have free roam of the rest of their house. This is so confusing to me. The letter wasn't even found in her room, and that's the only thing they block off from contamination. John and Patsy also had a bunch of people come over during this time, including friends, family members, victim advocates, and even a minister stopped by. They were all moving stuff around and even cleaned up the house a bit. More like destroyed possible evidence and made themselves suspects, but hey, these investigators know what they're doing, right? Well, clearly not, because at 1 p.m., one of the detectives asked John and one of his family friends to look through the house for anything suspicious. Yeah, the detective literally asked John to do his job. And John was probably in shambles because his daughter was missing. The detective really couldn't think of anyone else to ask. John went down to the basement with his friend and started searching. He opened a latch door in one of the rooms in the basement and found his lifeless daughter. How did the detectives miss this in their initial search? When JonBenét's body was found, her mouth was covered in duct tape, a nylon cord was tied around her wrists and neck, and she was wrapped in a white blanket. After he found his daughter, John picked her up and brought her upstairs, contaminating possible evidence and clues from the scene. John and Patsy were interviewed by the police, but not until after their daughter was found that afternoon. OMG, these detectives have dropped the ball so many times in this case. Okay, so in the basement, officials found 2 sets of unidentifiable footprints, as well as some rope that apparently didn't belong to the Ramsays. An autopsy was then performed on JonBenét. Examiners determined the cause of her passing was strangulation, which was done with a nylon cord and one of Patsy's paintbrushes. They also noted a skull fracture. And then, examiners found that JonBenét supposedly ate pineapple a few hours before getting eclipsed, which Patsy and John said they never fed their daughter pineapple that night. But wait until you hear this. There was a bowl of pineapple found in the kitchen with Burke's fingerprints on it. Patsy and John claimed Burke was asleep the whole night and never went down to eat pineapple, but there was literally a bowl of it with his fingerprints on it. That seems pretty obvious to me. But then again, the investigators messed up quite a bit in the evidence world, and even though the fingerprints were found, there was no way to tell when or how they were made. Well, nothing major happened in this case until 2003, when forensic investigators were able to get enough material from a liquid sample found on JonBenét's clothing to create a DNA profile. The DNA belonged to a male, but officials ran the sample through their database and weren't able to find a match. Other than that, there wasn't really any other solid evidence found, which may have been a different story if the investigators actually followed protocol for closing off and searching the crime scene. A bunch of handwriting samples were tested, suspects were interviewed, and new investigators had been assigned to the case, but no one could determine what had actually happened to JonBenét and who did it. So here are the 2 main theories that the followers of JonBenét's case had come up with. The first theory is that the Ramsays did it. I know it sounds terrible, but investigators did mention that the ransom letter was unusually long, so most people think it was staged. It was also written using their own pen and paper and demanded the same amount of money that John got in a bonus, which not many people knew about. Officials reported that the Ramsays were reluctant to do any interviews, which the family said was because they thought it would get in the way of the investigation, which makes absolutely no sense. But other people thought it was because they were the ones who did it. So some think Patsy accidentally knocked out her daughter and tried to find a way to cover it up, and others think Burke did it and tried to find a way to cover it up. I mean, the fingerprints found on the pineapple bowl seems to be a giveaway. But both of these theories don't quite match up with the evidence because the letter seemed to have been written before JonBenét was wiped out. Handwriting samples were eventually taken from the 3 family members and compared against the writing in the ransom notes. John and Burke's handwriting wasn't a match, but Patsy's was inconclusive. Later, the DNA evidence from JonBenét's clothing revealed that the Ramsays were no longer key suspects. Oh, and it turns out that in 1999, a jury actually voted to indict John and Patsy for putting their child in danger and obstructing the investigation, but the prosecutor didn't think the evidence met the claim and decided not to prosecute them. And this wasn't revealed until 2013, which seems a bit shady that it was kept on the download that long. Also, this story is all over the place and so confusing. OMG. So the second theory is that an intruder did it. This is because there was a shoe print found next to JonBenét's body that didn't belong to any of the Ramsays. There was a broken window in the basement that someone could have gotten into the house through. And with the DNA sample that was discovered on JonBenét's clothes, someone else was definitely involved. But who? In 2006, a guy named John Carr sent an email to a journalism professor saying that he was responsible for slaying JonBenét. Whoa. Who confesses to a crime in an email? Also, why would he email a random professor and not the cops? And why come forward 10 years later? It's just so out of the blue. So this guy said he was in love with JonBenét and admitted to giving her meds and hitting her in the head with a flashlight. In his emails, his writing style was similar to the writing in the ransom note. But even with all of this, the guy's DNA was tested against a sample from JonBenét's clothes and it wasn't a match. There also weren't any meds found in her system, so officials ruled him out as a suspect and assumed he was lying. Another suspect is a dude named Gary who apparently called one of his high school friends the day after JonBenét's passing and said he hurt a little girl who lived in Boulder. Okay, that can't be a coincidence. Also, why would he call an old friend to tell them? Like, hey, it's me from Miss chemistry class. Yeah, I'm doing great. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I just wanted to tell you that I iced out a little girl. So another weird thing about this dude is he once constricted his mom's throat with a telephone cord, the same exact way JonBenét was slain. But the real sketchy part is when he was arrested for an unrelated crime in 2011, he had a picture of JonBenét in his pocket. I cannot with this man. Well, Gary's DNA wasn't a match, so he was dropped as a suspect. Some of the other main suspects from JonBenét's case include the Ramsays' old housekeeper, a dude named Michael who took his own life shortly after JonBenét's execution, and one of the Ramsays' neighbors who dressed up as Santa Claus. Yo, those mall Santas have always creeped me out. Something about old men signing up to put a beard on and have kids sit on their lap just doesn't sit well with me. But honestly, I am so shook about this whole thing. Like, how do the crime scene investigators not even know how to, I don't know, investigate a crime scene properly? In all seriousness, what happened to JonBenét is awful, and I hope they're able to get justice for her soon. Until then, stay away from mall Santas, don't drink any go-go juice, and instead of pineapple, eat some waffles. Thanks for watching.